Hello and welcome to our module about the design assignment in this third week of the Designing Resilient Housing. In this week and in this video, I would like to tell you some more about the details of the requirements of your projects. We are working with generic users. We don't know who exactly is going to be cooking in that kitchen. We don't know who is going to be sleeping in that bedroom. We don't know how many people are going to be having dinner in that dining room or hanging out in the living room. So we are designing for a generic family of maybe 4 or 5 people and a space that is adaptable. So ideally, you will design something, first of all, that can grow in time, and we start with a smaller module, and then people, as their family develops and as they get more means and more money and more materials, they can expand their house. So in a way, the house is a growing organism. We plant the first seeds, and then afterwards it starts growing and growing until it reaches the mature size of where it needs to be to accommodate the needs and the means of the family that's going to be using it. So that's the first step. The next thing is to understand what is the cultural context of the place where you're designing. Cultural context, remember. In some cultures, it's totally fine if the same space is generic and is used for sleeping, for eating, for cooking, and for spending the day. Like, for example, the Philippines and Japan. In a lot of places, the Philippines, there is one shed in which basically the entire life of the family happens. It's small size and there's no separation between living space, day space, and a night space. So in such context, you have to see whether you can have like one large flexible space or you have to separate it. In other cultures, it's unacceptable to have people living and sleeping in the same space. So there's always a separation between bedrooms, living space, kitchen, bathroom, and so on. So you have to understand where you are, what is the tradition of the place where you are. Maybe look at some books, maybe interview some people, maybe find some websites that will tell you more about this specific culture where you are. And we really want to design something specific for the place and for the culture where we'll be building. So this part is essential. A next part is how big the house should be, or what are the spatial requirements for the house. We're looking for a house that's anywhere between 50 and 100 square meters. If it's a house of 50 square meters, it's rather small, and you can start with that module, or a house that can grow from 50 to 100. So starting with 50, that would have eventually a living room, one bedroom, and then the bathroom. Then if the house expands, then you can have more. You can have a second or third bedroom, you can have a dining hall, or you can have just like larger open spaces, as the lofts that we know here in New York being so fashionable recently. So again, you have to understand what the spatial requirements for the eventual family that you'll be designing for are. And I suggest you start with 50 square meters and then plan for eventual expansion to 100 and more square meters. It's up to you to decide the specific size. In some cultures have also specific traditions, and also in some cultures people are shorter, like in, for example, as far as I know, in the Philippines, the average height it's lower. It's smaller than the average height in the Netherlands. So obviously, if you're designing in the Netherlands, people are on average 6 feet and more tall. So you would want to be designing something for houses that have high ceilings. In a place like the Philippines, maybe the average height is 5.5 feet, or 5.6 feet, and so you will be designing spaces that are much smaller and much lower. In some areas, there is natural ventilation that is needed because there is no way that you're going to put air conditioning in rural areas that don't have access to electricity, obviously. So you want to have in those areas eventually transparencies or permeability of the openings of the building, so the fresh air can go through the building and create currents of air throughout the house and thus ventilate the house and cool the interior. In places like Mexico, for example, houses tend to be lifted above ground, so the air can flow under the house and this way cool the floor area. In other areas, houses are actually embedded in the ground. As some parts of China, they're basically carved into the ground and they're completely submerged underground, because this way the house stays cool and it receives a lot of natural cooling from the actual walls, from the ground, from the earth that it is excavated or carved into. So you have to see where you are. Now, it depends a lot whether you're designing vernacular traditional materials with traditional materials or you're designing something new. That's something up for you to decide. But again, here the main point is the spatial considerations, then the cultural considerations of your house, and then from there we'll take it on to the next steps into defining your design.